All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Taffy Campaign. I'm the National Foster Care Specialist at the Children's Bureau. And in an effort to hold on to my youth as much as possible, I've decided to change my birthday to how long I've been at the Children's Bureau, so I am a month and a half old. But much more left to come. Actually, let me just tell you a few words about what I'm doing at the Children's Bureau since I have just come on board recently. I am the Federal Project Officer for the National Resource Center on Permanency and Family Connections. I am also doing work to coordinate our training and TA efforts around fostering connections. And I'm also the liaison for the state foster care managers. And since it was announced on Friday, I'm very happy to say that I'm also the Federal Project Officer for our new cluster of diligent recruitment grantees. So, I've worked with a lot of you in the past in various capacities, but if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I do want to say, come up and find me during a break or during lunch and let's kind of get acquainted. Enough about me, though. Let's get to the real stars of the show, if you will. We have a really great panel with us today of truly dedicated and talented individuals from the National Resource Center for Permanency and Family Connections. And they're going to be talking with us today about meaningful family engagement. And with that, we've got Randy Jenkins, Angela Braxton, and Sherry Tomlinson. And they're going to be presenting for us everything from the policy to practice aspect of really involving families into the case plan development, placement decisions, removal decisions, etc. And we're going to talk some about the challenges that you all might feel as state leaders, but also some of the strategies that they have to offer that they've seen as they've gone across the nation and in their own practice work in order to be able to mitigate some of those challenges. And they'll give us some examples of that as well. Before we do that piece, though, I do really want to bring up for a few words the Executive Director of the National Resource Center, Dr. Gary Mallon.
Good morning. Literally a few brief words. When our National Resource Center was doing its RFP last year, one of the big changes in our RFP was how are we really going to meaningfully engage family partners? And as I was thinking, how are we going to do that? Because our colleagues at the National Resource Center for Youth Development had done such a wonderful job engaging youth as partners. And I remember at one meeting, a young person standing up there and saying, not only does the National Resource Center say what it means, they hired me as a consultant, and it was this young person. And I thought, wow, we really need to engage families in different ways than we've been engaging families in the past. It's not just bringing them to a conference and letting them do a little panel discussion and putting it out there, but we really need to embrace family engagement. And we started to kind of morph our thoughts into this concept of how do we really meaningfully engage parents? Because I think that there's a superficial engagement sometimes that we do, which is like that. You bring them to a meeting and they say their piece and then they leave. But we don't really engage families to some extent in some cases. And I know some of you have done wonderful jobs of that, but I just in my own experience hadn't seen us do that in the way that I thought we wanted to. And then some precipitous event happened. Nicole Boussard, who worked with the Systems of Care grantees who are here at the conference, she came up to me at the middle of a TNTA meeting and said, Gary, you know what? Our grants are ending and we got these great family partners and I really think that you should think about hiring them for your next grant. And I said, Nicole, I can't believe that you're saying this because we're in the midst of writing this grant and thinking about how do we really meaningfully engage people. And she said, well, I got the people for you. And Nicole, who is unfortunately not with us today because she's in Lafayette, in Louisiana, in case you don't know where that is. And I know our Louisiana people know that, but she's in Lafayette representing the National Resource Center tomorrow, speaking as their keynote at their conference that they're having there for child welfare folks and the courts, and doing a workshop. And Sherry Tomlinson, who's here with us today, was somebody who was going to be with her, but I was like, we need Sherry in Washington. Nicole, you're going to have to handle this one by yourself. So Nicole is there, and I wanted to kind of give a kudos to Nicole for really kind of bringing us together because she deserves that recognition, and she has the passion behind, really engaging families. I had no idea what she was doing and what the family partners were doing. I kind of, you know, when you're part of the NRC TNTA network, you hear these things and a lot of stuff is going on, but I had no idea of the wonderful and meaningful work that was really occurring with family partners. And we are absolutely delighted to say that our family partners are consultants for the National Resource Center for Permanency and Family Connections. They are not just family engagement consultants, they are consultants in a whole bunch of areas, and we are really delighted that Randy Jenkins and Angela Braxton and Sherry Tomlinson are here to talk with you today about their journey and about the work that they're doing, and hopefully the work that we will continue to do as Fostering Connections unfolds, and kind of helping you to think about strategies for taking back what they're talking about to your own state. So without further ado, I will give you Randy and Angela and Sherry.
Thank you. I have to take a few minutes before we begin because we need to publicly recognize Gary Mallon for his commitment and dedication. When he talked about Nicole and oh, we love her to death, and we're really missing her today, but we know she's doing her thing in Louisiana. She's representing us all there. But what I wanted to do was recognize Gary. Gary got on a call for a group that we have carried over at Nicole's lead from the Systems of Care grant. We have been on those calls from the Infinity Group. I don't know if some of you knew of that group during that time, but we have been on those calls every month, every third Wednesday of the month since those grants ended. And Gary was able to join us on a call one night. And I'll tell you what, Gary Mallon has done everything that he said he would do towards family engagement. He has not dropped the ball in anything. We just love him. We honor you and your commitment. And we just can't say it enough. Did you want to say a few words? I don't want to cry
I just
today.
want to join Angela in that and to say that it's so refreshing, and it was such an honor to be with someone that not only talks the talk but walks the walk, and we thank you for that.
One more thing. When Gary said earlier that we understand that some of you are doing family engagement, but not quite getting it, or we think we may be doing it by inviting someone to the table, Gary has truly sent us out there. He has a faith and a trust in us that we will go out there and do what we said we would do, that we just haven't found in very many places. But Gary puts that trust in us, and he believes in us. So let's get started.
Good morning. Oh, come on now. We can do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I'm excited about the opportunity to be with you all this morning to talk about meaningful family engagement. I'm Randy Jenkins, one of the facilitators of this great conversation. I like the title, calling it 2010 Policy to Practice Dialogue, because we've had an opportunity to have dialogue with some of you throughout the last 2 days, but also some of you, we've been to your states, and I'll share some of the information that we've picked up as we begin to look at what are we doing across the country on meaningful family engagement. Commissioner Samuels on yesterday talked about how we might change the narrative, changing the narrative about how we better engage families, especially fathers. Changing the narratives in ways that we have the voice of parents in our decision-making tables, whether it's a team decision-making meeting, a family team meeting, or a family group decision meeting. Having the voice of families as parent leaders that serve on oversight committees or task groups. Having the voice of families as co-trainers, co-training foster parents, or providing training during new worker orientation. So when we talk about changing the narratives, the voice of our families that we are serving becomes key. To talk in terms of changing the narratives, I'd like to introduce you to the panel a little bit further. You heard from them briefly, but allow me to introduce you to the panel using the digital stories.
In 1984, I began a career as a social worker. I had 2 college degrees, and I thought I knew how to help people. I was in daily contact with people in crisis. I thought I understood their problems, the obstacles they faced, and the pain they felt. I didn't know squat. In the late 1990s, I unwittingly embarked on a learning expedition. Through a series of events and poor choices, I found myself on the other side of the fence. I learned firsthand how depression, death, domestic violence, and drug addiction can spiral a seemingly normal life into chaos and destruction. I sat there, watching my life self-destruct, unable and unwilling to reach out for help. In 3 months' time, I was arrested twice due to my addiction to methamphetamine. My son was removed on both occasions during SWAT-style searches. I was convinced I was a horrible mother and a failure at life. What mother would choose methamphetamine over her child? I came to understand fear, pain, shame, and hopelessness as I was drowning in it. I had lost my voice. That was 9 years ago. I am forever grateful to a woman who provided me with support as a social worker. During my career as a social worker, she was our office assistant. During my early recovery, she was my lifeline. Rhonda refused to give up on me. A constant source of encouragement, prayer support, and companionship. When things looked the darkest, a friendly phone call or a cup of coffee saw me through. Rhonda saw hope where I saw despair. She saw love where I hated. And she taught me the true meaning of a helping relationship. In the end, it isn't important how many books you've read. It's the condition of your heart that matters. Today I lead a faith-based recovery group for addicts, a jail ministry, and work with families that have lost their voice. God has provided me with countless opportunities to share what I've learned on both sides of the fence. Today I understand what it's like to lose your voice and the faith, hard work, and determination that will restore it. Well, that was my life in a nutshell. I have to tell you this, that as I look out across the room and I think to myself, you know, it's kind of intimidating to be standing up here in front of this vast number of people. And so if you don't mind, what I'm going to do today, because this is not quite exactly the type of group that I'm used to speaking in front of, so I'm going to imagine just for a couple of minutes that you all have on orange jumpsuits. And I think we're going to get along great. Seriously, what I wanted to share just for a second or two, and then you'll learn more about my story here in a minute, but what I wanted to share with you is that I work with women that are incarcerated now. Most of them have had their children removed from their care. I also am in our local county. I work with a family advisory council, and on the statewide, I work with our Kansas Family Advisory Network, and I currently am serving as president of that organization. There's a lot of work left to be done out there. One of the things that I want to bring out just to keep you thinking is that sometimes we think that it's the frontline workers or it's the policy workers or whoever, that they're the ones who are going to make that difference. And I can tell you this, for me, in my life, It was the office assistant. She's the one who reached out to me, and she's the one who saved my life. And we all have a part to play in that. It doesn't matter whether we are the receptionist or whether we are way up high in the policy making. We can all make a difference, and families are worth it. Thank you.
My experience with child welfare as a mother addicted to alcohol and drugs for many years was not a very pleasant one. I'm a mother of 6 children who were lost to the child welfare system due to my addictions. I made several attempts to regain custody of my children during periods of sobriety, only to relapse more times than I could count. It wasn't that I didn't love my children or want to be a mother to them. I didn't know how to be a mom and had no idea how to stay clean of alcohol and drugs. I was in the process of trying to live my life as best I could. I had 7 years clean and sober, and I would tell my story frequently whenever asked at AA or NA meetings. On one occasion, I had been invited to speak at a dinner for drug-endangered children. Shortly after this dinner, a woman from child welfare wanted to speak with me. I thought, what do they want now? They already have all my children. But I gave her a call in hopes that she would tell me something about my children. She turned out to be the very worker who made the decision for me to not get my children back. I became involved as a family partner because she invited me by putting all honesty and sincerity on the table. I began to see that she was human with feelings and a heart. She took off her social worker hat. I took down my defenses, and we began to work in partnership toward family involvement in child welfare. She didn't just actively listen as the social workers are taught to do in school. She treated me with the respect as another human being and listened. I knew from my own experience that children cannot achieve safety, permanency, and well-being if social workers don't engage families or give up on them too quickly. Today, as an author, co-founder, and former president of the Kansas Family Advisory Network, Incorporated, family involvement has become my passion and gives me hope that things can and will be different for families dealing with the child welfare system today.
Now that you've met Angela, we can go now. We're done and over with. We will share more throughout the day about our stories, but I just want to put out there that it's ironic that I'm here at this particular conference. I've heard a lot about adoption spoken since yesterday, and I think for me, I may put a damper on it for you. I'm not trying to, but I have to be honest and I have to be real about my experiences with child welfare. My children, all my children were adopted. My 4 oldest by family members and my 2 younger sons were later adopted by someone else. I don't think those went so well. They didn't disrupt, but I don't think they went so well. And I think that my children feel the same way. I have a relationship with all of them today. They're all doing extremely well. We've had some ups and downs, but I think the thing that hurts me the most as their mother, as their birth mother, the thing that hurts me the most is that I eventually got clean and sober. God delivered me from alcohol and drugs 13 years ago. And I got the help that I needed. And they didn't. They really didn't. My hope is that when we think about children, putting children up for adoption, or children that are up for adoption, we need to think about adopting them out to somewhere better than where they came from. Please don't send them back to what they came from.
That's why family engagement is so important, because we believe that if you truly engage the birth families, and I'm not talking birth moms, I'm talking birth dads as well. And my hope is that eventually we'll stop separating the father piece in that, because we should have never had to add a fatherhood engagement initiative to anything. He should have been there from the beginning. He should have been there when the door was knocked on for the parent, for the mother. He should have been included then. I don't know where we missed that or why we missed that. But to me, he's always been a part. He may not have went through what I did, but he's always been a part of that. And we'll share more later. Just wanted to share that.
Having been a social worker for more than 30 years, I find no greater reward than helping the child welfare system better engage and work with fathers. This work of encouraging fathers builds upon my own relationship, or lack thereof, with my own father. I had to look at my own feelings about my father and his not being there. I wrote a poem to him, Dear Dad, so I could forgive him. I had to come to grips about how I felt about his not being there to teach me how to drive, stay out of trouble, or just about sex. I relied on my friends' fathers to teach me about these things and encourage me as I grew up. I also had to think about my own children and writing Father's Care, because I loved and cared for them and have always been part of their lives. I had to think about how, even in divorce, my children needed me to be actively involved in their lives. I reflected on the differences my children experienced when I moved out of the state where they lived and was not there to transport my son to football practice or to provide the emotional support he needed when his bicycle was stolen. I reflected on how I've always worried about my children and how they would be protected from sexual predators. I even thought about my not being there to protect them from abuse. I had to take responsibility for ensuring that child support was more than just financial, and that I had to make sure I stayed involved in their lives. I had to call them often and ask how they were doing in school. That I had key influences on their successes and failures and couldn't leave that responsibility to their mothers alone. Today, as a social work consultant, I use my experiences to help other fathers learn how important it is for them to be involved in their children's lives. They tend not to take responsibility for what happened and for how their children ended up in the foster care system, fail in school, or even have low self-esteem. Fathers do care and want to be involved in their children's lives. They need to be welcomed and supported in all decision-making processes. Again, I say to you, good morning, as we embrace upon this conversation about meaningful family engagement. Family engagement begins with leadership. As I listened on yesterday in one of the workshops talking about what it takes to implement systems change, one of the things that was talked about was that of leadership. Leadership is the key, the vision that says, yes, we want to do things differently, that develops and sets the tone so that the managers and supervisors and all staff embrace upon meaningful family engagement. It also has to say meaningful family engagement requires the allocation of staff to support the work and provide financial resources to support the work. So as I attended a second workshop where you were talking about how do we really get beyond just having parents in a focus group, I can tell you that it requires staff support and it requires financial support. And as we talked this morning, we hope to leave you with some strategies that you will be able to use when you go home to really develop your plans for how you will look at meaningful family engagement. When we think about meaningful family engagement, it begins with looking at and addressing some key elements. Now, if you haven't figured this out already, this morning's session will be real. It's not something that you'll find in a textbook. It's not based on theory and philosophy. It's the real-life experiences of those of our families who've come to the attention of the child welfare system. I'll do my best to represent those of fathers who have experience with the system, but it is going to be very real. Being real means then that we must take time to first listen to our families, to hear what went well and what did not go so well, to hear what they need and want and what it is we prescribe that may not be what they need and or want. You all have some notepads on your table. I hope that you will use these pads to write questions. Rather, they are questions that you will get to ask at the end of this dialogue, questions that you will get to ask throughout the day as you see us, or questions that you will go back to your states or your counties and begin to look at how do we get answers to these questions. As I said to a group just last week in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, I hope that there's something that's said this morning that will either cause you to embrace or cause you great pain, because we are going to keep it real. In keeping it real, family engagement begins with the very first knock on the door. When we go out as child protective or assessment workers, we have to begin to engage families right then. So family engagement means providing all parents with children in imminent risk of entering foster care with the information they need to successfully advocate for themselves and for their children. Hear about walking in the door.
One of my experiences early on with child welfare, actually a child welfare investigator, was coming to the door, and in our state in particular, which is Kansas, there was a green, institutional green, trifold pamphlet. Some of you from Kansas may remember that. My hope is that the color has changed at this point, but I remember that being very, very intimidating to me as a parent. I was very fearful. I was afraid. I did not know what they expected me to do because I was handed that pamphlet, told that they would return in 30 days, and gave me a list of things that I needed to have in order. There was no real explanation. They didn't come in the door. But the biggest thing that stood out to me was that pamphlet. And the reason it did is because I'd been to prison before. I was used to seeing that color. You never know what you're going to walk up on when you knock on somebody's door. I know that that's not your responsibility, but I think it is when we talk about engaging families. It is your responsibility to kind of gauge how families feel, how things might affect them differently than they do us. The strategy to that green pamphlet was we were invited as family partners to rewrite the language of that pamphlet. That was huge for us in the state of Kansas. We had never been asked to do anything but this long list of things to get our children back. And here we were asked to change policy because that pamphlet was a part of policy. And we were also engaged as a family partner group to change the handbook that is initially handed out. The original one, the last one that I remember before the brand new one that looks really, really nice now, was a black and white. And it had all these acronyms and unexplained big words, and we just couldn't understand that. And a lot of families can understand that. We don't understand your acronyms. I don't expect you to understand the letters behind my name for the job that I do outside of consulting. We were able to change that. We rewrote the handbook at a 4th grade level, I believe it was, so that most folks who did receive that handbook could understand it. It's okay to invite your families to help you to create a new document, to help you go over your policies, your existing policies, to make sure that they're family friendly and that they can understand them. It's okay to do that. The handbook now has color to it. It's in English and Spanish. I hope English first, most times. And the acronyms are explained. The acronyms are fully explained, and I know that acronyms change, oh my God, every 24 hours, I think. And then with each state that we've been to, they're different. So that's part of our presentation. When we were in Louisiana, we asked them, please no acronyms, and then we gave them one. And that was, what was it, SCL, spell check later. But I just wanted to share a couple of strategies that worked for us in Kansas on the walking in the door, making that initial engagement. The biggest thing for me when I decided to come back and get involved, I had no reason whatsoever to have anything to do with the child welfare system again after I had lost all my children. I had moved on with my life, and here comes the lady that made the decision for me to not get my kids back. That in itself was huge for me because I had changed. I was different. And I know when I relinquished to my 2 younger sons, they probably expected me to go smoke myself to death somewhere, but that didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. I stayed clean and went back to school and did pretty darn well for myself. And
say it sometime.
Oh, I got plenty. and when she came, I had to do it because it was the right thing to do. Because if I could stop anybody else from going through what me and my children had, then I needed to do that. And it's been a long haul, and it's still not there yet. But I believe that we're getting there. Okay. And I'll save some for later.
Okay. From a father's perspective, walking in the door. First of all, understand that fathers sometimes feel relief that you're at their door. They tell me that they have been asking for someone to intervene in their children's lives, and they are finally having an opportunity to be even considered as a placement resource, but they have been asking for this. Statistics show that of the fathers that we are able to contact, 24% of those fathers want their children. So that is a resource that is available to us. On the flip side of that, fathers tell me about some of their not so happy experiences. Experiences that says the worker knocked on the door and I answered the door, but the worker asked for the child's mom. And during the entire visit, the worker never spoke to me. It reminds me then of my work in child welfare as a foster care worker out there. When I knocked on the door in Child Protective Services, I never asked where the father was. And I've come to realize and understand I didn't ask because I didn't know what I would do with the answer. So we have to look at developing strategies to allow us to have resources for workers to do something with the answer. Our next key element. Substance abuse, something that's prevalent in over 80% of those cases that come to the attention of the child welfare system. To provide all parents with substance abuse histories the skills they need to advocate for the services and resources they need to overcome and maintain their recovery.
I remember one of the very first meetings that I went to in my active addiction about my son. And I also remember how everybody at this table seemed extremely focused in on tasks that I needed to complete. And everybody had in their hands some kind of written material, and they were all sticking it in front of me. And on the appearance of things would tell you that I should have been able to have comprehended what was being put in front of me. I had a bachelor's degree, and I also had a master's degree, so surely, I could comprehend what was being thrown in front of me. But you know what was going through my mind that day? It was a secret that I had, and that secret was I was unable to read. That was one of the effects of my addiction. I could not comprehend what was being put in front of me. And I would no more have admitted that to that room full of people, and I didn't tell them. There were very few people in my early recovery that knew that, and my comprehension ability came back. But that was a secret that I had that I refused to share. When I work with women in jail now, many times they come in and they are methamphetamine addicts as well. And that's one of the things that I talk to them about is I say, how you doing on your reading? And they look at me and I say, you can't read yet, can you? And they go, no. And I say, it'll come back. It'll come back. But you got to work at it. And then we'd start talking about plans for success. And I guess what I wanted to share with you is that one of the best ways to work with an addict is to learn as much as you can about that addiction. In the part of the country where I'm from, methamphetamine is just a horrible, horrible, horrible drug. And that seems to be what a lot of us flock to, shall we say. And one of the other things about methamphetamine is that it rots your teeth, okay? How many of you have ever experienced tooth pain? Raise your hands. Is there, and keep them up if there's nothing worse. I mean, childbirth, okay, I could do that. You give me tooth pain and I don't do well, okay? Are you in agreement with that? Okay, well, imagine this. Imagine that you have not just one tooth that's killing you, but you've got a mouthful of them. And the infection underneath that rotten tooth decay is just running rampant through you. Are you going to be able to focus? And one of the things that sometimes we just got to look at is trying to figure out, okay, maybe we got to get Sherry's teeth in line before we can tell her that we expect her to do all these tasks. And so just being smart about, okay, wait a minute, we want her to get a job, and we want her to do this, and we want her to do that, and we want her in recovery, and we want this. But maybe if we just get the infection cleared out of her mouth first, she'll be able to succeed. So, that's all.
When we talk with fathers about substance abuse issues, one of the key to this work of engaging fathers is getting them to take responsibility. What role did you play in your child coming to the attention of the Child Welfare Agency? And so fathers have a tendency to blame it on someone else, especially when they are no longer in a relationship with the child's mother. So they say to me, Sharon and I used to work together, so I can maybe pick on Sharon. So they say to me, well, you didn't take the child from me, you took the child from Sharon. I didn't play a role in that. And so I asked them, where were they when their children were removed? And they say, well, I was in jail for selling drugs. You played a role in your child coming to the attention of the Child Welfare Agency. And so one of the key pieces of this work is getting fathers to acknowledge their responsibility for their child coming to the attention. Child and family team meetings, and I just chose one model of a meeting, but you all have many different models that you may call and reference. But the purpose of this is to look at how we provide parents with children in imminent risk of entering foster care the means to participate in all decisions made about their children's care, custody, and placement.
What I wanted to share about that is there was a time in my life when I went to a lot of protective custody hearings or temporary custody hearings for child and needed care cases. One of the things that I remember about that is that, it was Thursdays and everybody all files in at the same time, and then what really happens is that the social workers and the attorneys, they kind of meet back in the back room, and we just kind of run through a couple of things, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then we go into the courtroom. Have you ever thought about what it would feel like to be a family member and everybody walks in to this room and they shut you out? That's my family you're talking about. And then you come walking out of that door and you're laughing? What am I to think? Is my family a joke? Is that what I'm worth to you? And it didn't hit me until I was on the other side of the fence, just how devastating that is. One of the things that I learned is that it seems like there is a barrier between social workers and families. And it's what I call the us versus them. You're on one side or the other. And true family engagement is about destroying those barriers and about becoming a team. A team that doesn't meet to discuss something unless both parties are present, and that can be a real challenge. Can you imagine, social workers, if you walked into juvenile court and the attorneys all said, "Come back here and tell us what's going on," and you say, "I need to bring my family with me"? How would that work? Let's try it.
It would cause a shift. It would cause a shift in the court system. It would cause something to change if that were to happen. Why are we so afraid of change? Families go through change after change after change after change. And I understand that you do too, in the systems you work in. Believe me, I have a very, very strong respect for social workers today. I understand a lot better today than I did all those years ago. So many decisions were made about my family and my children without my input. Just letting us know a lot of times about when the meeting really is, the real meeting, not the meeting where we come in and sign the paperwork and go out. And we sign that paperwork most times without reading it because we're scared to death that if we don't, we're not compliant and we will not get our children back. It is so scary for parents. And I don't want to tell you I'm afraid. I just want you to believe that I'm going to be able to do this. And as an addict, I have absolutely no idea when I sign that paper how in the heck I'm going to complete all those tasks. No idea whatsoever. Sometimes what I need is for you to sit down with me and go over some of the steps I might take. Go over what needs to go first. Help me to prioritize what I need to do. There's so much more to this than making the decision that adoption or foster care is the only permanence for our children.
When we think in terms of talking with fathers, fathers simply say, ask me what I need when I'm at this meeting, and look at providing services that are for me. 2 questions not to ask fathers at this meeting. 2 questions not to ask. Where have you been, and are you paying child support? Ask me either of those questions, and that will be the last time you see me. So when we talk about meaningful engagement of fathers, we have to look at what does it mean for the fathers who are there. Guilford County, that does these types of meetings, that does an excellent job of getting Father's Day, meaning that they have Father's Day at 50% of the time. But when they look at the fathers complete the service plan, it drops to 25% of the time. And when we look at whether or not they complete the service plan, it drops to 12.5% of the time. Which means that even when we do very good at getting them there, keeping them engaged and involved, we tend to lose. And that we have to take responsibility for. I'm going to keep us moving, my colleagues, because we want to get to something we call the backstory. So I want to go through these other slides a little bit more quickly. But it also means that looking at how we involve parents at policy and resource allocation decisions, provide parents who have experienced the child welfare system with the opportunities to influence and improve child welfare policy, practice, and resource allocation, which means that we have to look at bringing those parents to the table. And when we bring them to the table, recognizing that they can be involved in the decision-making around how the dollars are spent. In Detroit, I had an opportunity to work with a group that was preparing a grant proposal to help young men aged 18 to 30 become gainfully employed. And so I said to them, we need to have 2 young men aged 18 to 30 to be a part of this grant writing process. The young men identified that the lack of transportation was a barrier for them in becoming gainfully employed. Well, my thinking is we're in Detroit. We build cars. I should be able to get a car for somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500. It may not be the best car, but we can get a car. Well, the young men sitting at the table said that not having a car was not what they meant when they said lack of transportation. But that lack of transportation meant that they didn't have valid driver's license, they didn't have insurance, they had outstanding tickets. Were we going to fix that with $1,500? No. But had I been the one writing that proposal without them there, I would have written in that we're going to get 50 cars at $1,000 to $1,500 a piece, and that's going to solve the problem. So when we talk about how parents can be involved, they provide us what's really needed in their lives. And I don't know if you all have one quickly that you want to share.
I just want to share a little piece about actually being invited to that table, per se. I have to say that my first invitation was to sign that paperwork, and my next invitations were to be a part of a Systems of Care committee, a statewide steering committee. I was so scared. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but we had a grant team that did know all those things, and they fully supported us. Myself and a couple of others ended up sitting on this statewide steering committee for that grant. And when you invite a family to the table, invite 2. Try to bring 2 so that they're sitting there with somebody else who's familiar to them, somebody else with some of their same struggles. And if you can't do that, make sure that that engagement of them is not just an invitation to leave them sitting alone. When you break for a break or you break for lunch, take them with you. Make them feel a part of. It's a trust thing. We already on either side have that such a huge lack of trust that when we invite them to the table, don't leave me sitting there all by myself, not understanding what's going on in that meeting. That never happened in my case, thank God. And when I started talking, I couldn't shut up, So that's what happened in my particular case. But I think when we invite families, we just do it to cause them to be a table dressing. I like to say that. It's like we're table dressing sometimes, and that's it. So that we can say, oh, sure, we're doing family engagement. See here, we have Sherry here, and we have Angela here. Hear their voice. You don't have to agree with them, but respect that voice and respect their opinions and listen to them. Genuinely listen.
The other key element is looking at how we provide new tools for workers, providing all child welfare staff the skills and tools necessary to work effectively with families and children and youth. And for me, when we talk about new tools for workers, I have the great opportunity to be involved next week in some training in Greenville, North Carolina, where we will have child protective and assessment workers, foster care workers, adoptive workers, foster parents, birth parents, guardian ad litem, all sitting in the same room and going through a full day of training together. So it's not a conversation about those people or the way they do things or an us or them, but we are all in the training together receiving the same message. And it has been one of the most powerful opportunities that I've had in this work of child welfare. Key to this work is bringing everyone together in a training.
What I want to add to that is that sometimes some really awesome stuff happens quite by accident. And I just want to share a real quick story with you about one of those quite by accident things. A lot of the colleagues that I used to work with at the Child Welfare Agency were putting together a team to walk for another colleague who had been diagnosed with cancer. And they put as social workers many times do, they put it together at the very last second. I'm sure none of you can relate to that. But you know, they were busy with other things. I don't know. Maybe juvenile court was that day. But so they put it together at the last minute, and they really did not have enough walkers. Okay, it was like an all-night thing, you know. And so, you know how social workers are, you know, they were more focused on making sure they had enough food and lawn chairs and this kind of stuff, but they really did not have enough people to walk. And it was really kind of sad, if you can imagine. And so they called me at the last minute, of course, and said, "We need you." Well, it happened to be the night that I was supposed to do the recovery group. And so I sent someone to the recovery group instead and said, you know, give my apologies to the group and tell them that I needed to go walk, that they're not going to make it if I'm not there. We've got to find other people to walk, you know, and it's just too sad to just let go of. And what I saw happen was, as soon as the recovery group was over, I looked up and across the park, here they came. Here came families who had had their children taken by those people over there, and many of them had their children with them. And they just walked across that park, and they walked right up there, and they said, "We heard you needed some help, and we'd like to join you tonight." And you know what I saw happen that night was based on the needs of the social workers. And I think we were all really touched by that, because the families took that role that normally the social workers take, and they filled the need. And that one night, there was no us, there was no them, there was just a bunch of people all sitting around watching the real energetic ones walk around the park and eating some really good food. And you know, that's what true family engagement is. It's about building relationships. And however you need to do that. And sometimes it'll happen by accident, but when it happens, you know it.
So a key piece of that is that those of you who are looking at how do you get families, ask the families for the help, and you will get families to be a part of that. So that's one piece of it. The last piece is looking at public information. Inform public, legislators, and the community at large about the struggles and successes of families who have been involved in child welfare. And I had an opportunity to meet with some judges and guardian ad litems and talking with them about meaningful family engagement. And judges were saying to me, when those families leave the courtroom, they know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do. And I said to them, but you've ordered them to do these 7 or 8 services, and they don't know, you know, it's overwhelming for them. And so because of that, they don't know where to start. And so often they don't start. Well, but I told them exactly where to start. I told them where to go and what to do, and they know what to do. I said to the judges, Your Honor, have you ever watched Charlie Brown when he's talking to the teacher. Womp, 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 womp. And that's what the court process is like for our families. So it means that we need to do something a little bit differently from the way that we've been doing. It means that we need to get the true voice of our families, those who have experienced the system. I want to raise the bar a little bit for you right now so that you can have an opportunity to get the true voice of our families. We started off with what I call the bureaucratic stuff that we have to go through, but now let's raise the bars a little bit higher. I'm going to ask each to give about 7 minutes of a real presentation about their story. And I have to be the taskmaster, so I'm sorry. Go. Who's going first?
He's reining us in. He's trying to be the boss. We love working with Randy. Actually, our coming together as a team has worked out extremely well for us, and we just love him to death. But anyway, and I'm going to take my 7 minutes, and what I want to go to, though, because I could stay here all day. There's so many different parts to my story, but of course we don't have all day. What I do want to talk about is the adoption piece. My 4 oldest children were adopted by my cousin and her husband. That cousin is someone who I happen to get high with from time to time. So that's what I meant when I said, my children were removed from me and then placed with her. She's still getting high, just not with me, but she's still doing her thing, and was never, ever, held accountable for that. My kids are grown. Those 4 are grown now and have done really, really well. They're all wonderful children. Some of the folk got to meet one of them last week at a training that I was at in Dallas, but it's absolutely amazing how they have overcome and the strength that they've had through what they've been through. My 2 younger sons, I relinquished my rights to them. I had a 1.5 years clean and sober, and I relinquished my rights. And I'm not happy about that today. It's shortly after I did that, they were removed from the home that I thought that they would be, where they would be, and I didn't see them for 8 years. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know if they were even together. I didn't know if they were happy. Those are all the things you think about. And I still managed to stay clean and sober and get a new job and just get up, suit up, and show up every day. Every day with a lump in my throat. With a lump in my throat that just felt like a big, huge, gaping hole. And that's what I dealt with every day. But I used to pray that God would just let me know if they were together and if they were okay. In 2006, after I'd gotten involved with systems of care, my book came out. I wrote a book. I wrote my story is what I'd done. And shortly after that, the lady who adopted my 2 younger sons contacted one of my daughters through an email. And it was just giving basic information. I think these are your siblings and da-da-da-da-da. No contact information or anything. Well, that daughter came to stay the summer with me that year. And she received another email. And this one had pictures. And she invited me in the living room to look at these pictures, and I thought she was going to show me this boyfriend again from college. And I'm like, I do not want to see another picture of that boy. Please don't show me another picture of him. So he still looks the same. She said, you have to close your eyes, Mom. I'm not going to show you if you don't close your eyes. So I went along with it, thinking I was going to look at that boyfriend again. And I opened my eyes, and there they were. I thought I was going to pass out. I thought I was going to pass out. You know, having not seen them, the last time I saw them, they were little guys. And just the whole process of, like I said, getting up, just riding down the street, seeing kids, wondering if they're yours. And, you know, seeing them, I just started crying. Oh, my God. But when I relinquished my rights to them, what was the worst part for me was walking through that courthouse after signing those papers that day. And I didn't see anything else but every sheriff and every holstered gun in that courthouse that day. I felt like I had sold my soul to the devil when I signed those papers. We have got to know what we're doing with families when we push for relinquishments and terminations. We've got to know what we're doing. Because I had the opportunity to meet them. I had the opportunity shortly after that email to meet them. My son called me and he said, "We're ready to meet you." And when I met him, he hugged me and he said, "I used to smell you all the time." So when we talk about permanency and we talk about breaking up families, you have to remember that child needs permanency. And, you know, a year ago, I wouldn't have said that permanency was any more than being back with that birth family. I don't believe that today because I believe children find permanency in other ways. But don't ever think that you're going to break that bond to that mom. It doesn't happen. I ended up seeing them. Met the adoptive mother. She made it real clear to me that I was no longer their mother. They were not to call me mother. And it caused a real stressful time for us. We spent Christmas of 2006 was the first time I'd ever spent with all my children at the same time. And that was a very happy time. Everybody was really excited. And I came to D.C. to a grantees meeting. Computer crashed that day. Some of you may remember if you were there. And, you know, things weren't going well. It was just that day. And me and some other family partners were back in my room later that night. I got an upgrade for the computer crash. We were in the room, and we were talking and all excited about this family engagement movement is what we were calling it then. And we were talking, everybody talked about their vision at the national level, and we were just on fire and excited. We were almost shouting in there. And when everybody left, you know, I was still excited. And I jumped on the big old bed and popped my laptop open and checked my email. And there was an email from the adopted mother telling me that I couldn't see them anymore until they were adults and they could make the decision on their own. Who the heck did she think she was? That was probably the first time in my life, you know how you feel, I don't know if you've ever felt weak in your knees or you've passed out, because you usually just go. I'd never felt that until that moment. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, because here I am out here talking about family engagement and child welfare. And here this lady is treating me like I felt the child welfare system had treated me before. Who did she think she was? And then, better than that, why did she open the can of worms and do my children that way? That hurt more than anything. I had the opportunity, I'm going to wrap it up, Brandy. I had the opportunity to see him again. I had to share this stuff. I'm sorry, you guys. But I had the opportunity to see them again. We gradually started talking, because when she approached me again, I told her no, I couldn't do it. I could not live through that again. And I'm seeing them now, and there's some struggles there. There's some real struggles there. But I have to commend her for being able to raise those two. She was handicapped. She had some issues of her own. She has some serious issues of her own. Sometimes I'm not sure if they were better for her than she was for them or what. But things are going okay. They're just okay at this point.
Well, I wanted to share a little bit about, I guess, the backstory with me, and that sometimes people will ask me, they'll say, okay, so what happened? I mean, how do you go from working in a public child welfare agency for almost 15 years doing protective services to having your child removed, not once, but twice? And you know, all I can tell you is that I learned a very, very valuable lesson. And that lesson is there is not much that separates me from anyone else. And that we all have a breaking point. And I know where mine is today, because I've been there and back. I can tell you that the things that I've learned through that journey have meant more to me than anything else in the whole world. And sometimes people will ask me the question on, you know, what's the biggest regret that you have? And do you know, if I were to stand here and really be honest with you, I would have to tell you that I don't have any regrets. I'm the person I am today because of that whole mess. And I'm and I'm able to see things on an entirely different level. I want to share a real quick story about the very first recovery meeting that I went to. And I was really intimidated. I live in a real small town, and people aren't real nice there, okay? And you know, I made headlines, you know, of course. There wasn't much else to report on. Farmer Joe's cows weren't out that day. So I made headlines. And, you know, it was it was a horrible thing. You know, I didn't feel like I could go anywhere because I felt like everybody was looking at me, you know. And so my self-esteem level was at an all-time low, okay. And I had this horrible amount of shame. And, oh, you know, I was just, ooh, that was a terrible person. And so I go to this first recovery meeting, and I'm really scared about it. And I walk in the door, and there's this great big gal. And she's across the room from me, and I see her right when I get there. And she heads towards me. And I think, oh, no. And I recognize who she is, and I took her children several years before. And I thought, okay, well, it's all over now, you know. and you know, I just stood there, and I looked at her because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought, she's going to nail me. I'm going down, and it's going to hurt. But I was ready for it, and I just stood there, and instead of hitting me, what she did was she gave me the biggest bear hug anybody's ever given me, and she whispered in my ear, and she said, I am so proud of you tonight. And I thought, yeah, you know, here I am. I'm the one who keeps trying to make divider lines between us, you know. I'm the one that refuses to see that we're all just people, and we're all capable of making mistakes. Whether we're the methamphetamine addict or the social worker, we've all made mistakes. And, you know, it's people like, and her first name is Lisa. In fact, I got a text from her right before I got up here, which is why I thought of her. And the text just said, good luck today. And what I learned from those people like Lisa, is that together we can change the world. But we just have to stop looking at those divider lines. We have to start breaking down those barriers. Lisa and the women that I work with now, they are so willing to become actively involved in family engagement. Addicts make wonderful family partners. And the reason we do is if we're in recovery, I might add. Let's just make that perfectly clear. The reason that we do, and I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the 12 steps or not, but there's a lot of healing that happens through those 12 steps. And if you have somebody who's actively working in a recovery program, they've done a lot of healing. They're used to being mentored, and they're also used to mentoring. And those are the things that you need to look for in a family partner. If you're going to engage people to do this work, those are the kinds of people you need. So I encourage y'all, when you get back to wherever you're from, look around your community, look around, see who's in recovery, you know, kind of keep your eyes open, because they make wonderful family partners. That's all I've got for right now. I'm gonna stop.
I want one real quick of importance to follow what Sherry just said. Addicts are wonderful folks to work with. Be real careful. Don't run out and get the addict that's got, I'd say, 6 months clean. You're playing with their recovery, and they need to be working on themselves at that time. Be real careful about that, because sometimes we tend to want to fix everything and make everything look nice after we've screwed it all up. And we want to help, and we want to do well, but it's real easy for us to put ourselves at the back end of things and not take care of ourselves. That's the hardest thing for us to do, is say no.
And that's a good point, Angela. And I was kind of just thrown in. How many years would you say?
I would say at least 2.
I was going to say 5.
I would
Somebody
say
in recovery at least 5 years. They've done the healing they needed to do, and they're ready to get busy and help you.
I'd say at 2 they can sit in on some meetings with you. I wouldn't send them. I wouldn't send them out on any great task or any. Don't send them to an addict's house.
Right.
That's a setup.
Right. So I think that you can hear in both Sherry and Angela's story that the real message in understanding how to engage families, we need to talk to some families. And you have in your counties, your states, your systems, your resource centers, the opportunities to engage families. It means going out there, though, and recruiting those families and supporting those families. And that's why I talked earlier about the need for staff support, the need for the financial support, because as we want families to be a part of our meetings are generally held between 9 and 5. And we want families to also be working. So that's why the financial piece becomes key. It's a tough decision to figure out how we want to keep this dialogue going, because I want to touch for just a moment about the work with fathers. But I want to make sure that we leave a few moments for questions for Angela and Sherry at the end. So let me just say that in working with fathers, fathers tell me that when they come into the Child Welfare Agency, that when they look at the staff composition of those agencies, the staff reflects some 80 to 85% female staff. And they wonder about those female staff and whether they will engage them, because they wonder what was the relationship for those female staff with their fathers or lack thereof. They wonder how they will perceive when they walk in the door, because they think about, wow, what was your relationship this past weekend with your spouse or significant other? They say when they walk into an office that's filled with, as I said, about 80% women, they wonder whether or not their caseworker got their child support check or not this month. And how will that then impact them? So as they began telling me this, I had to actually stop and think about Randy for a moment. And how does Randy feel about doing this work of engaging and working with fathers? I've been doing it now for some 7 to 8 years, but in order for me to do it, I had to step back and look at my backstory and how I felt about my father being there or lack thereof. And I couldn't do the work before I dealt within myself. I had to recognize that now that my mother is now deceased and I never knew who my father was, that I never would know. And so what does that mean for me in this work? So I'll share with you quickly, Dear Dad, and then I'll move us on through. Dear Dad, I've written many a poem, I've even read quite a few, but this is my first to fathers, so I thought I'd address it to you. The words don't really come easy. I'm not sure what I might say. I've never called you Daddy or said Happy Father's Day. I've written poems to my mother, as beautiful as any rose, thanking her for her love, the best poems I'd ever composed. But to you I have not written, and now I understand why. The thought of your not being there easily makes me want to cry. I've written poems to my wife, as sweet as ever can be, saying how much I loved her, glad she was there for me. No words of rhyme for you I ever sat down to write, so the time has finally come to write one to you tonight. First, let me say I forgive you for having not ever been there to teach me how to play baseball or pull a football out of the air. No guide from you I got about the importance of school. You weren't there with me in church as I learned the golden rule. I was blessed to have others step in to teach me how to drive, how to use a hammer or tool to work so I could survive. So, Dad, though you were not there, I don't hold that against you today. Instead, I'll spend all my time helping others along the way. Dear Dad. When fathers are engaged and involved in their children's lives, children do better in school. And for those of you who are working with families, you know that for many of our families, the father and the mother are no longer together in a relationship. And we're not trying to put them back in a relationship. We're simply trying to help both sides understand the importance of fathers being involved in their children's lives. And so fathers help children do better in school. I tell people all the time, I went to college to major in math. I can look at my checkbook and see it says $14.79, and I can tell whether the 79 cents is right or not. But you ask me a question about biology, I can't help you. I don't think I ever got better than a C- or a D+. Just ain't me. So it means that there are two parents that can help out with homework, and they don't have to live together in order to do that. When they are together, when they're involved in their children's lives, children do better in school and are more likely to attach to school. So in my digital story, you heard me talk about not being there to take my son to football practice because I moved from South Carolina to North Carolina, and they later moved from South Carolina to Atlanta. My son, who's 26 years old now, still holds that against me today, because it meant for his mother that she had to work a full-time and a part-time job and wasn't able to transport him, so he couldn't play football. Children are more likely to stay out of trouble, simply meaning that their father's figure in being involved there, and when I talk about being blessed to have others step in, it took a whole lot of other men to help Randy stay on the right track. And so I say to people, I have absolutely nothing against single mothers, single parents. My mother was a single parent of 8. She could swing a real good switch, and I got mine, and she'd come back down here if I still needed some. But when fathers are involved, it took a man to make me a man. And so I'll leave it at that. When fathers are involved in their children's lives, there is delayed sexual activity. Since I picked on Sharon earlier, I'll continue to do so. I go to visit Sharon, and I knock on the door, and Dad opens the door, delayed sexual activity. Doesn't take any theory or philosophy to make that point clear. And because there is delayed sexual activity, you have fewer teenage pregnancies. And so what I say to our mothers is, I want you to understand that fathers play a key role in the lives of their children. I'll end with my last minute. I'm trying to keep me on time, too. I'll end with my last minute when I say sometimes I raise the bar. Just last week in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, I had an opportunity to be at the commissioners' meeting, and I asked the question, what does it feel like for the non-custodial father when he meets a foster parent? And they tell me that when father meets the foster parent, there's a range of feeling from feeling guilty, feeling anger, feeling shame, just being afraid. They feel inadequate, they feel sad. And because of that feeling, or those feelings, they are sometimes seen as hostile, they are seen as critical, they are seen as non-cooperative, they are seen as aggressive, some are just seen as quiet. So I begin to say that when we really want to find out things, we need to look at what fathers are feeling, because we see the behavior. We got to go back and ask them about how they're doing today. So I raised the bar one more time. I said, what does it feel like for foster parents when they meet the non-custodial fathers? And I got responses that said that foster parents are scared, they are protective, they are angry, they are judgmental. And I said, so how do they behave? They are defensive, they are controlling, some act cold. I could go on to tell you that we've got to change the dialogue when we talk about working with and engaging fathers, so that we look at how we all feel. And in some workshops, I ask how workers feel when they meet fathers and how do they behave. And you know, when I put it up on the board, if I covered up the name of the feelings and the behaviors, you wouldn't be able to tell me which one I was talking about. So we need to continue this dialogue, and I look forward to the opportunity to do so. I want to stop right there and see what kinds of questions you might have. And I'm going to ask you to come to the mic as you ask your questions of either Angela or Sherry or me. Wow. We stopped the panel. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I have a question, and this might be mostly for Angela. We have a parent collaboration group in our state and have brought parents together, and what we do is we say we have parents who have successfully navigated our system, who come together to try to help us improve our system. But what we haven't done is had parents like you, and I'd love to have parents like you at the table as well. And I wonder if you have any advice for how to reach out to parents who have not necessarily successfully navigated our system.
Okay, do you mean birth parents?
Yes.
Do you not have birth parents at the time?
We have birth parents. I'm talking about parents who did not get their children back.
You know, I want to clean up. Well, not clean up, but I do want to say that because my case was not successful at the time, doesn't mean that I don't view it as a success with me and my children now. But I do understand where you're coming from, and you're wondering how to get those people to the table. Do you have records?
Sure, and how we get parents to the table now is basically we ask caseworkers, can you recommend parents who did particularly well?
You're looking for the ones that did well. You're looking for all those happy stories. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. We need those. You need those stories as well. But you also need the ones that weren't so great.
That's right.
You do. And you invite them. Have the caseworkers go back and see if they can check to see what's going on with some of those families. And you invite those families. It's possible that you could use some of the families you already have to invite those families as well. Are they employed by your system?
We have one parent who's employed by our system. The rest are volunteers.
Send the volunteer. And I say that because sometimes families who are employed by systems tend to bring that same threat that the social worker brings or the caseworker brings to the families that they're working with. So send the volunteer.
All right, thank you.
I'd also recommend that you look at talking with your foster parents about those parents who maintain a relationship with their children. We talk about birth parents and foster parent partnerships, but recognize that we are not the inventors of that foster parents have been engaged in working with birth parents for a long time. And so they know what families still maintain those connections, regardless of whether those children have been adopted. And they can help us find those families, because the message for from those families whose rights have been terminated has a lot to tell us about the engagement we can provide or the lack thereof. With that, I want to tell you that we certainly are very interested in continuing this conversation with you. I've put up their information in terms of how you can reach us. We are very much wanting to help work with you around strategies for engaging families, help you identify, looking first at how you identify those families. When I say that there are Angelas and Sherrys in your states, in your counties, understand when I talk about doing training next week in Greenville, we've identified some of those Angelas and Sherrys there. When we talk about doing work in other states, our first thing is to look at how can we identify some of the Angelas and Sherrys. So also in this work, I believe that it is a shared floor. So it's not that I get to be the facilitator, but it really is a shared floor, a shared opportunity. That's why we didn't want to sit to the table. There is no power dimensions up here with us. We all have it, except for one thing. I always let the parents have the last word. So with that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present. I hope that we've given you some things to think about, some tools or some questions that you want to raise as you go back and you go through the rest of the day in terms of how you can help embrace meaningful family engagement. So I don't know which one of you want to go first.
I guess to close out, what I'd like to say is just that I know how many families feel when they feel hopeless. And that hopeless feeling that I had when my child was removed from my care and then moved across state lines, and I worked to get him back, was the most hopeless feeling that I've ever had. And the struggles that I had, the shame that I felt, the depression that I was going through at the time, and the losses that I had had in my life up until that point were just so overwhelming. And sometimes I think we forget that what families need from us more than anything else in the whole wide world is hope. And that's what you all have to offer. Whether it's a friendly smile, whether it's an encouraging word, I know that nobody gets into social work for the money, okay? And I also know that you all care and that you have a lot of hope to share. And I just encourage you to join with the families that are out there and just really spread that hope around, because there's so many folks that need it. Thank you.
I want to go back to you, ma'am. You could always contact the Resource Center and have us to come out and visit with the group that you do have already. All you got to do is contact the National Resource Center for Permanency and Family Connections. We're available for every state, I think, aren't we, Gary? We are, anyway. We're ready to go. He just calls and we go. We're doing a lot of work in Louisiana right now. They are very excited down there about family engagement. And we're excited as well. We go in there and we get engaged. We've had an excellent time there. Thank you so much to the Federal Children's Bureau, to the Adopt Us Kids. Am I saying that right? I can't say all that other. I just can't put it together. But I want to thank you for having us, inviting us. It's been a great time here, and I hope that some of the other states, some of you states, will pick up the phone, call the National Resource Center, give us a call, We can answer any questions you have. I know you have them. I think a lot of folks are afraid to ask them. And I think a lot of times we're afraid to say, I'm a social worker and I don't know the answer to that. You don't have to have all the answers. We don't either. But we can sit down and we can work together collaboratively and we can figure them out. Thanks.
I feel like we've gotten so much wisdom this morning. Anyway, have a wonderful lunch, and please be back for your workshops at 1:15. Thank you.